Hello, everyone. Welcome to my live stream tonight. As promised, we're going to be looking through this fabulous biography of Shirley Chisholm by Susan Brownmiller. It was written in 1972, so this actually was before her historic bid for the White House. And I'm going to give it a moment. Just let us kind of assemble. I hope you're as excited as I am. I've always been really just fascinated by her and like her politics and how she oriented herself in regards to them. So, yeah. This book, one interesting fact about it is you can see here that it was 75 cents originally. I don't know if that's visible. I'll bring it a little bit closer for you to see, but yeah, 75 cents for this original copy at first. I got this book for $2.95, so it's increased in value, let's say, from, and I'm going to read this to you. Fighting Shirley Chisholm. Election Day, November 5th, 1968, was a great victory for Shirley Chisholm. She became the first Black woman ever to be elected to Congress in the nation. So she was the first in many ways. So yeah, she was also the first Black woman elected to Congress in the U.S. So very important historical figure. As a representative from the borough of Brooklyn in New York, she has won a reputation as a fearless rebel. She actively fights for causes she believes in and directs a major part of her attention to the problems and desires of Blacks, women, and young people. Mrs. Chisholm says, "I am particularly struck by the number of aged men who represent America. It seems we are not taking into consideration what is happening in this country today. We are not giving bright young people who are often so much in touch with the times a sufficient chance to break into politics and be heard." How little things change. Okay. So this book's been marked up a little bit. It says Montenegro on it. I don't know if that was someone's name or whatever. And it was sold at Paperback Traders. Used paperbacks, comics, we trade, we sell. Northeast Halsey, Portland, Oregon. Okay, so that must have been a place that this was at one point. I'm not familiar with Paperback Traders, so that must have been before my time. Victory. The campaign headquarters was in a turmoil. Their own Shirley Chisholm had won. She was going to Congress. Shirley held up a V for Victory sign. When the crowd quieted down a little, she began to speak. "I never could have done it without the help of my husband, Conrad," she said quietly. "He stood by me 100% all the way. It is a great honor to be chosen as the nation's first Black Congresswoman. As a United States representative in Washington, I intend to represent all the people, the Blacks, the whites, the men, the women, and especially the youth. There are many new ideas abroad in this country, and I intend to speak for those ideas, and my voice will be heard." About the author. So as I said, this was written by Susan Brownmiller, so many of you may know about her and some of her work. And maybe I'll share some of her work actually on this channel at some point, because I do have a couple of her books. Miller is a well-known journalist who writes articles for the New York Times, the Village Voice, and other important publications. Her cover story on Shirley Chisholm for the New York Times Magazine led to her writing this longer biography for young readers. My cat is going apeshit in the background, by the way, so that should be fun too. Miss Brownmiller grew up in Brooklyn and now lives in Greenwich Village in New York City. Should probably turn this around. So as you can see, produced as an archway paperback in New York. Quite classy looking, isn't it? Quite fine. I love these older books and how they kind of get that weathered look. It's published by Pocket Books, a division of Simon & Schuster. So it was originally, I guess, published in 1970, and this edition is the third printing, which came out in 1972. So that's what we're looking at today. Contents: Barbados, back home to Brooklyn, 3 heroines, to college on scholarship, Jamaican men always want the best, she can lead, Assemblywoman Chisholm, a black woman in Congress. This is fighting Shirley Chisholm, first black congresswoman, Washington, rebel in Congress, a second term, and some facts you might like to know. So I've already kind of glanced through this book and read a few things, and I found it quite inspiring already. So I don't know what we're going to get to tonight. And if anyone has anything in here that they'd like me to particularly look at, please do let me know. And actually, I just remembered something. I need to plug in my microphone because I want to have a better sound. Just give me a second while I do that. Little intermission. Mercury's in retrograde. Things cannot be perfect. Oh, goodness. Okay. Yes, let's get this in here as well. Have some better sound since I'm going to be reading. Oh, gosh. Okay. Let me check the sound. All right. Is that better? I hope so. Okay. So back to the book. Chapter 1, Barbados. So, yeah. Interestingly enough, while Shirley was born in Brooklyn, New York, she grew up for the early part of her life in Barbados. And yeah, raised by her grandmothers. Grandma Seals, I believe. So let's look at this a little bit. Shirley loved her grandmother and she loved the farm. She couldn't imagine any other kind of life. She had lived on the island of Barbados as long as she could remember, and certainly she didn't remember this Brooklyn place where she was born. It was part of New York City in the United States of America, so her grandmother told her. Granny had told her the story often enough so that she knew it by heart. When she was 3 years old, she and her 2 sisters and 4 cousins had come to Barbados on a big white steamship called the Vulcania. Granny, Mrs. Emmeline Seals, was to look after them until their parents came to take them to Brooklyn. Her parents and her cousins' parents were working hard to save their money so one day the families could be together again. It took a long time to save the money because there was a big depression going on in America, and jobs were scarce. Jobs were particularly hard for black men to find. Shirley's grandmother told the children with an angry look in her eye. There were things called prejudice and discrimination that kept black men from good factory jobs. But in a recent letter, which Granny had let Shirley read aloud to the other children, Shirley's mother, Ruby, had written that her father had gotten a new job in a burlap factory. The pay wasn't too good, but the work was steady, And the bank account, the money that they were bringing the children back to America, was slowly growing. One day soon, Shirley and always ended her letters, I will have my dear sweet girls here with me. Let's just let that pass there. But if Shirley's mother and father were far away in America, it was still a very big family that lived together at the Seals' farm. There was Grandma Seals, Uncle Lincoln, and Aunt Myrtle, and Shirley's 2 younger sisters. Then there were Shirley's 4 cousins, whose mother lived in Brooklyn, too. In the early 1930s, when Shirley lived in Barbados, the tiny island was still a British colony. Barbados was granted its independence in 1960. Barbados is a part of the group of islands known as the West Indies. Lush and fertile, the tropical islands of the West Indies appear on the map like stepping stones between the tip of Florida and the top of South America. I'm sorry. Jesus, can you, really? I don't even believe that that's a trans person, honestly, at this point. That's how fucking, gross people are nowadays. Ugh. Shirley Chisholm doesn't deserve that. You should shut the fuck up and learn about her. She's awesome. She's who we should all be more like. God damn. Also, can people tell me if the buffering is okay? I keep getting error alerts here, and I'm not sure if it's just YouTube being finicky or not. I just, I had a feeling going in tonight that there was just going to be communication issues. So let's just deal with it as it is. But yeah, so basically, let's finish reading about where Shirley grew up, okay? When Shirley looked around her, she saw rolling green hills and neat square fields of sugar cane and corn. Just over the hills were the beautiful beaches of Barbados, with miles of powdered coral, both pink and white for sand. Oh God, it sounds like paradise. The land was good to the Bahans, the people who lived in Barbados. And so was the sea. The local fishermen went out each morning to catch the island's specialty, the silver-glinted flying fish. The way her grandmother cooked it, flying fish was one of Shirley's favorite meals. Shirley was a fat little girl. There were so many good things to eat on Barbados. No one ever went hungry. Even the public roads were lined with fruit-bearing trees that the little girl could climb. When Shirley and her friends grew tired of eating fruit, they had a game that they sometimes played. They would hide in the fruit trees along the side of the road. When an unsuspecting grown-up passed by, plop, an overripe mango or pawpaw, the local name for the melon-like papaya, might just happen to fall on top of his head. So, basically it goes into describing what life was like in Barbados. Let's kind of talk about her school that she went to there. It was Vauxhall Village School. So discipline in the Vauxhall Village School was strict. The teacher kept a long ruler in the classroom, and she used it if the children were noisy or not paying attention. And I'm sorry if I'm saying this wrong. I'm not familiar with what people from Barbados are called, so I'm not sure if this is Bajans or Bahans. My mind wants to pronounce the J like an H, so if anyone knows and could answer, that would be great. Bahins are known for their belief in a good education as the way to success in life, and the village of Vauxhall was no exception. The parents of the village always sided with the teachers, not with their children, if the children came home with a bad report from school. "I don't want to hear any excuses," Granny Seals would say. "This teacher says you didn't know your lessons, and that means you'll have to stay in the house and work on them. No pleading or begging could make her change her mind." Shirley thrived on the discipline of school. By the age of 6, it was clear that she was the brightest one among her sisters and cousins. In the schoolroom, she began to listen in on the older children's lessons with the teacher's approval. "You're a bright girl," the teacher told her one day. "Maybe when you grow up, you'll be a teacher too." "Maybe," Shirley replied, but she couldn't really imagine what it was like to be grown up at all. She liked being a child just fine. Shirley and her sisters wore starched pink and yellow dresses with little round collars. Her boy cousins and Uncle Lincoln wore dark suits and black shoes. Granny herself dressed in black. After a big Sunday breakfast, let's give it a moment. In Barbados, the official language is English, and the majority of residents speak Bajan or Bajan. Bajan. Okay, that makes sense. So Bajans, people from Barbados are called Bajans. An English-based Creole heavily influenced by West Africa. Thank you for looking that up for me. This is part of the fun of having a live stream, is that you can have people, participate in these ways. Okay. Shirley looked up at her mother and her grandmother. Suddenly, both of the women were crying. Strict, prim, upright Granny Seals had broken down completely and was wailing. "We'll never see each other again. I'll never see my daughters again. I'll never see the children again." She was clutching at Shirley's mother and Shirley at the same time. In 1 minute, everyone was crying. It was a scene Shirley would never forget as long as she lived. The vivid memory of the pier in Bridgetown would stay in her mind for many years. Her tall, proud grandmother wailing helplessly because she was suddenly childless. The boat took 6 days to reach New York. 2 of the smaller children cried for 2 days straight. The ocean frightened them. The boat was uncomfortably crowded, and the motion of the sea made them sick. The carefree, sunny part of Shirley's childhood was over. The St. Hills had taken an apartment in the Brownsville section of Brooklyn on Liberty Avenue. They were one of the few black families in Brownville at the time. The apartment to which Ruby and Charlie Hill brought the children was the best that the family could afford. It was known as a cold water flat. The apartment did not have hot water. The apartment did have hot water, but there was no central heating. Mr. St. Hill bought a kerosene heater to try to keep the place warm, but the children, used to the tropical sun of Barbados, were miserable. The first winter, Shirley, Odessa, and Muriel all got colds. As soon as one child got better, another would come down with the temperature. There were now 4 girls in the family. While Shirley and her sisters were in Barbados, the St. Hills had another baby named Selma. Mrs. St. Hill had all she could manage that winter with baby Selma and the 3 girls with their colds and coughs and runny noses. It took some time for Shirley to adjust to Brooklyn. First there was the unpleasant cold weather, then there was the surprise of the tall buildings. Even the gray 4-story tenement buildings of Brownsville looked tall to Shirley after Barbados. In Bridgetown, the buildings had been low and spaced far apart, with pretty little gardens with red hibiscus flowers surrounding them. There were few flowers in Brooklyn, and the trees did not bear fruit. It took Shirley a while to get used to the city streets. She had never seen so much traffic, so many cars, buses, and trucks. Unlike Barbados, in Brooklyn the roadways were divided into streets and sidewalks, and Mrs. St. Hill had to teach the children to walk on the sidewalks and not in the street. "You'll get hit by a car if you don't walk along close to the building," she told the girls. Mrs. St. Hill had to spend most of the day in the apartment caring for baby Selma, so when she needed milk or medicine for the baby, she sent her oldest daughter to the store after school. The drugstore was several blocks away from the apartment. Mrs. St. Hill gave Shirley careful instructions and patiently named the streets along the way. But each time Shirley went out, she forgot to look at the street signs and tried to find the way by looking for certain landmarks like the candy store and the grocery and the funeral parlor that she had noticed before and memorized. She generally got hopelessly lost. Several times a neighborhood policeman had to bring her back to the Liberty Avenue apartment. Mrs. St. Hill would calm her upset daughter and explain once more that in Brooklyn you had to follow street signs because the stores on the street could go out of business or move to a new location on another block. Shirley was bewildered. Stores in Barbados never moved. They stayed in the same place for generations, handed down from father to son. How could a store in Brooklyn be there 1 week and gone the next? That was New York City, Mrs. Hill explained. They were still in the Depression, and people would open a store, find they didn't have enough money to keep it going, and be forced to close it down. Shirley finally memorized the street signs and stopped looking for familiar stores. I'm going to read through this section just because I think looking at her childhood is pretty fascinating and kind of how she adjusted to life in the U.S. So let's look at her schooling and such. Public School 84 on Glenmore Avenue was overcrowded, so the principal had divided the school day into a morning shift and an afternoon shift. Shirley and her sisters got the morning shift. 2/3 of their classmates were white. The girls' teachers discovered that the education Shirley, Odessa, and Muriel had received in the little one-room schoolhouse in Vauxhall had been very good. After talking it over with the principal, the teachers told the St. Hill girls they were going to be skipped a grade to a more advanced class. The girls' only problem was American history. In Barbados, they had studied British history. They hadn't learned about the 13 colonies, the Declaration of Independence, the American Revolution, and the Civil War. The sisters had to stay after school, along with some poor students who couldn't keep up with the regular work for extra classes in American history. Mr. St. Hill worked long hours each day at the burlap factory. His job was to pile up the big burlap bags on a loading platform for the truckmen. It was hard, back-breaking work. Shirley's father came home exhausted every night at 6:15. Shirley looked forward to 6:15 each night when she would hear her father's key in the lock. It hadn't taken her long to start calling him Papa. As soon as Mr. St. Hill came home, Shirley's mother would begin to put food on the table. Dinner time was an important ritual in the St. Hill home, just as it was at Granny Seal's farm in Barbados. The whole family sat at the dinner table together. Shirley's mother and father would ask each of the girls in turn how their schoolwork had gone that day. "I never had much of a formal education," Mr. St. Hill used to tell the children over and over, "and that's why all I can do to earn a living is work at the burlap factory. If it's the last thing I do, my girls are going to get a good education so they can do better in life than I did." Mrs. St. Hill always agreed with her husband. At the farm in Barbados, Granny had always been strict about the children doing the chores. But Shirley's mother never pushed the children much to help her around the house. She was strict about their homework, though. "Your job is to study," she always told them. "Bring home a good report card, and that will be enough for me. I can manage the household chores. You tend to your studying." Mrs. St. Hill was worried about all the colds that the girls caught every winter. At last she told her husband that she was going to search for a steam-heated apartment. She finally found one on Ralph Avenue in the Bedford-Stuyvesant section of Brooklyn. Shirley and her sisters were transferred to PS 28 on Herkimer Street. The teachers at the new school were so impressed with Shirley's ability that they skipped her again. So she was skipped ahead 2 grades. That's pretty incredible. The problem with the Ralph Avenue apartment was that the rent was more than Mr. St. Hill could manage. Jobs were still scarce, and the pay was very low at the factory. Because so many people were unemployed, there was no chance of earning extra money with overtime. When Selma was old enough to go to school, Mrs. St. Hill decided to earn the extra money they needed by working a few days a week. Shirley's mother found day work as a maid in the Flatbush section of Brooklyn. She cleaned, did washing and ironing, and scrubbed floors for 40 cents an hour plus car fare. On the days when Shirley's mother had to go to work, she laid the children's lunch out on the table before she left in the morning. Mrs. St. Hill put Shirley in charge of the younger children. She had an extra key made for the door and put it on a piece of string that she tied around Shirley's neck. That way you won't lose it, she told Shirley. I, too, had a key around my neck growing up, so. At the noon recess from school, Shirley picked up Odessa, Muriel, and Selma at their classrooms and brought them home to the Ralph Avenue apartment for lunch, carefully using the key around her neck to open the door. Shirley took her new responsibility very seriously. Odessa and Muriel used to complain that she was too strict with them about finishing their food, but Shirley made sure they ate everything on their plates. Her mother had told her she was in charge. After lunch, she would walk them back to school. Most of the black children in the neighborhood had mothers who had to work as cleaning women in other people's houses to make ends meet in their own homes. All the older children wore the telltale keys around their necks on strings. Shirley and the others were known in the neighborhood as the latchkey children. Now in the evening, Shirley's father and her mother both came home tired and worn. Sometimes Mrs. St. Hill walked into the house with a shopping bag. In it were cast-off clothing and leftover food from the families she worked for. The leftovers became part of the evening meal Mrs. St. Hill served to her family. Shirley hated to see her mother grown so worn before her eyes. All the prettiness had gone from Mrs. St. Hill's face, and in its place was a hard look of bitter determination. Mrs. St. Hill told her husband she wanted to move again. At night, after Shirley had gone to bed, she could hear her mother and father arguing in the kitchen. "I want my girls to have their own bedroom," Mrs. St. Hill was saying. "They're growing up and they need some privacy." "You know we can't afford a larger place, Ruby," Mr. St. Hill answered in a low voice. "I could be laid off at any time at the factory, and we're barely managing to keep our heads above water now." "My girls are going to have their own beds in their own bedroom," Mrs. St. Hill replied. "I'll find us an apartment somewhere. You'll see." Mrs. St. Hill was true to her word. She did find a larger apartment. The landlord agreed to rent it to her at a reduced price when Mrs. St. Hill said she could do all the janitor work in the building. So the family packed up all its belongings and moved again. The new apartment was on Patchen Avenue. There was plenty of room for the girls. Mrs. St. Hill kept up her share of the bargain with the landlord by tending to the coal furnace and putting the heavy garbage cans out front early in the morning for the sanitation trucks to take away. Once a week, she mopped the hallways and the staircases of the building from top to bottom. Shirley watched her mother and understood. "She's doing this for my sisters and me," Shirley said to herself. "I'd better not disappoint her." Whew. I think we'll skip this one chapter. To college on scholarship. Shirley tore open an important-looking white envelope. "A scholarship to Barnard College," she told her mother proudly. "And last week I got an offer of one to Hofstra." Mrs. St. Hill looked at the letter. "That's the 4th scholarship you've been offered, isn't it? I knew my daughter was bright, but I never dreamed that the colleges would pay her money to go to their schools. Have you decided which offer you'll accept? I think, Shirley said slowly, that I'm going to go to Brooklyn College. These scholarships will pay for my tuition. But if I go to Brooklyn, the tuition is free anyhow. I can live at home and save money on living expenses, too. Those other 2 scholarships I got can be used at Brooklyn College, and they'll more than pay for my books and supplies. Brooklyn has a good academic standing. What more could I want? Some of your friends are going to Brooklyn, too, aren't they? Mrs. St. Hill asked. The ones who passed the entrance exams, Shirley laughed. That 2-day examination for Brooklyn College was the hardest exam I ever took. Shirley started Brooklyn College that fall, the first member of her family to get a higher education. The Brooklyn College campus was right in the heart of Flatbush, the neighborhood where Shirley's mother had worked as a domestic a few years before. Hello, Radical by Choice. There's still plenty to hear about. We're still only at Shirley's, we've only gotten to Shirley going to college. Shirley liked Brooklyn's campus. The low red brick buildings with white wood trim had a pleasant colonial look to them, and they faced on a large grass square. The grass on the square, the students called it the quadrangle, was always trim and neat. The campus even had a small bridge and a tiny water lily pod with benches alongside it that made a comfortable, quiet spot for reading between classes. For socializing, there was the noisy basement cafeteria where the students gathered with their trays of food and compared classroom lecture notes about politics. The slim, dark, intense young woman with glasses, who hurried to and from her classes on the little quadrangle, was a far cry from the fat little girl who loved to run barefoot on the island of Barbados. Shirley decided to major in sociology at Brooklyn. She showed her parents the college catalog where the different courses were listed. You see, she explained to them, sociology will teach me how different groups of people behave among themselves and how they relate to society. I've always been interested in the relationship between black and white and rich and poor in this city, and that's what sociology is all about. How does sociology train you to earn a living, Shirley? It's a good background for a lot of things, Shirley answered. If I decide to go into teaching, and I probably will, sociology is a fine major to have, and it's also the best thing if I go into social work. Whatever I do with my life, I'm sure it will have something to do with helping others. And sociology will help me understand a lot about the world. The world needs a lot of help right now, Shirley's mother said. You can say that again, said Mr. St. Hill as he went on to switch on the radio. Let's listen to the news. I mean, isn't this sweet? The way that this is set up is just so, it's such a piece of treasure. So this talks a bit about her attending or becoming part of the debate society. Shirley had never been shy about speaking up in school, despite some difficulty pronouncing her S's. And one thing she discovered about herself was that she loved to argue a political point. Brooklyn College had a debating society, and Shirley decided to attend a couple of its meetings. Before she knew it, the debating society became her favorite after-class club. Shirley and her teammates argued such questions as whether the U.S. Armed Forces should be integrated, whether the United States should abolish capital punishment, or whether the poll tax in the South should be abolished. Whenever a hot issue was in the news, the debating society examined both sides and presented the arguments. Shirley discovered she was turning into a fiery speaker who could stand up on her 2 feet and talk with just a page of notes and facts to guide her. She loved to be the captain and cleanup speaker for her team, the one who spoke last and summed up all the facts for her side. I can really persuade people when I speak, she thought, and I'm getting better at it all the time. It's a good feeling to be able to move people with words, to convince them with facts and a clearly presented argument. The test, of course, was when the club members voted on which side had presented the better arguments and had won the debate. Shirley's team didn't always win, but it won more often than it lost. Professor Louis Warsoff of the Political Science Department often came to the debating society meetings to hear the students conduct their debates. Once, when Shirley's team was arguing whether 18-year-olds should be allowed to vote, Professor Warsoff came over to Shirley after the debate and congratulated her on her presentation. On another occasion, when Shirley was serving as a moderator between the two sides, Professor Warsoff had made a special point of telling her how well she had handled herself. "You were able to see both sides of the issue," the professor told her, "and your questions to the debaters were right to the point. You brought up interesting side issues that they had missed." Shirley felt flattered and very pleased. Let's continue this because Professor Warsoff is actually someone who suggested that she take a political career. One day in her senior year, Professor Warsoff called Shirley into his office. "Well, Miss St. Hill, how's our champion debater?" he asked. "Very well, thank you," Shirley answered. She wondered why Professor Warsoff had asked to speak to her. She wasn't taking any classes with him this year, so it couldn't be that there was something wrong with her grades. The professor came right to the point. "Have you thought about what you're going to do after you graduate, Shirley?" he asked. "I'll probably teach for a living," Shirley answered a bit stiffly. "It's an area that's open to Negro women, as you know, and it's something I think I do well. My early education in Barbados was excellent, and I think that's what prepared me to do well in school later on. I'd like to help other children the way I was helped to learn to read and write." "Yes, I think you would make a good teacher," Professor Warsoff replied. "But I wonder if you'll find the teaching profession challenging enough. You're a young woman with a lot of energy and a very scrappy personality, and you're obviously quite concerned with social issues. I wonder if you've ever thought of going into politics." "Politics?" Shirley's voice was raised a full octave. "Yes, does the idea surprise you? I happen to think you're a natural for it. I think you might be able to make quite a contribution in the political field." Shirley shook her head in disbelief. The only black woman she had ever heard of in politics was Mary McLeod Bethune, and even Mrs. Bethune wasn't really in politics. She was an educator to whom President Roosevelt gave important government assignments. What in the world was Professor Warsoff driving at? Shirley thought back to the white boy in her public school class who had said, "Negroes don't go to college, and girls don't do anything important in life." But Professor Warsoff was white too, and he was looking at her very seriously. He certainly wasn't making fun of her. "Professor Warsoff," Shirley began formally, "I'm black and a woman. How many black women do you know of in politics? How many black women are there in the United States Congress?" "None," the professor answered, lighting his pipe. "But there's got to be a first sometime. Don't you think? And if there's got to be a first, I think you'd be the right person. Frankly, I think you're the sort of person who wouldn't settle for anything else." Shirley was speechless. She seldom confided her hopes and ambitions to anyone, and here was this white man, a college professor, who was talking to her about her future and describing goals far greater than those she usually allowed herself to dream about. "Professor Warsoff," Shirley said slowly, "I may not know much about practical politics, but from what I know, I'd say that on the local level, it's pretty corrupt. Negroes aren't even allowed to become members of the local Democratic clubs in Brooklyn." "That will change," Professor Warsoff. Occasionally, it seems that my software is disconnecting, so sorry about all the challenges tonight. It's too bad. We get an extra day this year so that we can look at this book together, and then this happened. What a drag.
stretch for a second. What do you all think so far? Isn't this a great book? I mean, it was written for children. I think that's important to understand. So the tone of it is a little bit, well, whatever. It's still important stuff. 2 evenings later, Shirley walked into the League's headquarters with 15 signatures on the nominating petition Holder had given her. It wasn't as easy as I thought it would be, Shirley told Holder. I had to ring a lot of doorbells to get these 15 signatures. Some people who I just assumed were registered voters turned out not to be registered at all. And some of those who were registered said we were crazy, that a black man would never get to be a judge in Brooklyn. That's our problem, Mrs. Chisholm, Holder told her. Most of the black people in this neighborhood are not registered to vote, and many of the others don't think we stand a chance. One of our jobs will be to get hundreds of new people registered so they can vote for Flagg in the general election. I know we can do it, and I hope you'll continue to help us. Shirley nodded. Give me another one of those nominating petitions, she said suddenly. I just thought of some more people I can ask to sign. Holder looked at Shirley with surprise. When you take on a project, Mrs. Chisholm, you really work at it, don't you? He said. That's how I approach everything in life, Mr. Holder, Shirley replied. And I would like to be on the winning team. Shirley and Wesley Holder grew to be good friends during the Flagg campaign. Shirley liked the well-mannered politician from British Guiana, and he in turn gave her more and more responsibility as the campaign wore on. The campaign was a bitter one, but when it was over, Lewis Flagg had been elected judge. Shirley Chisholm had gotten her feet wet in politics, and she had been on a winning team. Chapter 6, She Can Lead. The year 1960 was significant for black people in the United States of America. Down south, the sit-ins had begun, started by black college students. The new civil rights movement spread like fire until it reached the north. Even in Brooklyn, a new courage and militance were noticeable. In 1960, a bright and personable black lawyer named Thomas R. Jones from the Bedford-Stuyvesant Political League gathered together a group of friends, both black and white, and founded the Unity Democratic Club. Jones declared as the club's candidate for state assemblyman. Shirley was buzzing with news about the club when Conrad came home from one of his trips. This is something entirely new for the neighborhood, she said. Jones feels that after all these years, the political league has the wrong approach to politics. He says we're never going to get anywhere until we fight the machine politicians on their own ground by forming a real democratic club and challenging the old whites-only club for the party leadership in Bedford-Stuyvesant. Jones and his friends feel they can actually take over the party in this district. What does your friend Wesley Holder think? Conrad asked. Shirley made a face. I don't think Wesley's going to go along with Jones, she said. Those two just don't seem to like each other. But I think Wesley's wrong on this one. If we're ever going to get any real political power, we have to take control of the party machinery. The old club is strong because it gets patronage from the party. Half of the white club's captains have cushy jobs in City Hall. That's why they work so hard at campaign time. So after that analysis, Shirley, are you going to work in the Tom Jones campaign? Conrad inquired. I do believe so, Shirley replied. You know I'm an activist. I can't stay out of a good fight. Shirley joined the Unity Club and soon became a vice president. The small band of workers that Tom Jones had fought hard that spring, but the odds were against them. Tom Jones lost to his white opponent in the Democratic Party. It isn't over yet, Shirley told Conrad. Unity has made a name for itself in the neighborhood. We're going to conduct a big voter registration drive this fall. With the presidential race coming up in November, you ought to be able to register a lot of new voters. That's right, Shirley agreed thoughtfully. The contest between John F. Kennedy and Richard Nixon will create a lot of voter interest. A lot of people who don't know anything about the local campaigns will want a chance to vote for the president. I told the club that my Spanish is good enough now for me to canvass the Puerto Rican people in this neighborhood. The Unity Club must stand for unity among Black, white, and Puerto Rican. You're getting me so interested in this that I think I'm going to go down and join the Unity Club myself, Conrad decided. Wonderful, his wife replied. You'll be more than welcome. Shirley's patient canvassing and the hard work of many others began to produce results. In 1962, the club was ready to try again. Tom Jones was the club's candidate for state assembly and for the party leader in the district. The Unity Club had attracted many new members by this time, and the executive committee had more than enough dedicated workers to appoint as club captains. Each club captain was in charge of a small election district, a few streets within the larger district from which Jones was running for the state assembly. It was the job of each club captain to get out the vote in his election district on primary day. Shirley and Conrad were both assigned election districts, and they went out each night to talk to the voters on their lists. When the votes were counted, Tom Jones had won the Democratic primary. In the general election 2 months later, Jones had no trouble at all beating his Republican opponent. The Unity Democratic Club was triumphant at last. The New York State Legislature began its new term in January. Each Monday, Tom Jones traveled to Albany, the state capital, to vote in the assembly. When he returned to Brooklyn at the end of the week, he gave a progress report to the members of the Unity Club. Shirley was fascinated by Tom Jones's description of the political process in Albany. The more he talked, the more she wished that she could be the one who introduced bills and tried to steer them through their various stages all the way up to governor. I'd better not start daydreaming, Shirley told herself firmly. Tom Jones is our assemblyman, and that's that. I have plenty of important work of my own to do. Shirley had been appointed New York City's chief educational consultant for all its day nurseries, and she spent her working days traveling from daycare center to daycare center, giving advice to the center's directors and straightening out problems whenever they arose. She still found time, however, to be active in the Unity Club. In recognition of her organizing skills, the members had elected her co-leader. Assemblyman Jones was up for re-election in 1964, but an unusual thing happened. The leaders of Brooklyn's County Democratic Organization came to him and asked him to be their candidate for civil court judge. Jones called an urgent meeting of the Unity Club's executive committee to tell them about the surprise offer he had received. I think I'm going to accept the nomination, Jones told the group. It's a great honor to be asked to serve as a judge. What this means for the club is that we're going to have to find the best person we can to run for the assembly, someone with real leadership ability. Go home and think it over, and next week let's come back and discuss some names. The members agreed, and the meeting broke up. On her way to the door, Shirley overheard a few of the women talking among themselves. Why not give it to Shirley Chisholm, one of them said loudly. She can lead. Why not give it to Chisholm, another lady echoed. And another, why not? That night, Shirley had a long talk with Conrad. With your energy and your ability to get things done, you do a wonderful job in the assembly, her husband told her. I think you ought to tell the executive board at the next meeting that you're interested in running. They'll never give it to me, Shirley said with a shake of her head. No Black woman has ever held an elective office in Brooklyn. You could be the first. Shirley laughed. That's what a professor of mine at Brooklyn College once told me. He always said I should go into politics. You've been in politics, Shirley, for many years. But now is the time for you to run for office. Don't you want to run for the assembly? Yes, I do, Shirley replied. And I feel strong enough to win. But you do understand that this will change our life drastically. I'll have to quit my consultant's job with the city, and I'll be away from home 3 or 4 days a week whenever the legislature is in session. You always put up with my traveling, so I guess I can put up with yours, Conrad said gently. As an assemblywoman, I'd be a public figure, Shirley went on. There would be meetings and dinners and speeches every night. I know what it would be like. Conrad laughed. Sounds like the life you're already leading, only for the first time you'll actually get paid for being a politician. You really are in favor of it? Shirley asked anxiously. I certainly am, because I know what you've waited for. I know it's what it's what you've wanted for a long time. Early in our marriage, I knew you'd be the star in the family. I'm going to do it, Conrad, Shirley said suddenly. I'm going in there at the next executive board meeting and tell them I'm ready to fight. I have my supporters, I know, and the rest will just have to be persuaded. Some of them won't like the idea of a woman running at all. I'll go in and say, Gentlemen, have your discussion if you need to have it. I want the nomination, and I intend to fight for it. I'm the strongest candidate you have, and I know I can win. That ought to convince them I'm serious, don't you think? I think the club will choose you, Shirley. In fact, I'm certain of it. Now let's get some sleep, Assemblywoman Chisholm. The Unity Club did choose Shirley Chisholm as their candidate for the state assembly. She went on to win the Democratic primary easily, and the general election as well. In 1964, Mrs. Chisholm became the first black woman to be elected to public office in Brooklyn. She was 40 years old. Assemblywoman Chisholm. It's just my luck, Shirley said to Conrad, that as soon as I get elected to the assembly, they start to change the district lines. Shirley was first elected to the state assembly in 1964. The regular term for the New York state legislature is 2 years, but because the legislature had decided to redraw the boundaries of some of its districts in order to make the population distribution more even, Shirley had to run again in 1965 and 1966. She had to run 3 years in a row. Each time you run, you get more votes, Conrad reminded his wife. That means you're building up quite a reputation in Bedford-Stuyvesant. That's true, Shirley acknowledged. My name is right at the bottom of the voting machine, but I always pull higher than the top of the ticket. I can't walk down the street now without some people recognizing me. They expect me to do a job for them in Albany. And you must be doing what they want, or they wouldn't keep voting you back into office. So here we have some photos, and the photos in this are just brilliant. So I want to make sure that you can see this well. This is Fighting Shirley Chisholm, is the way the candidate began her street corner meetings. Here she demonstrates her campaign style while the television cameras grind away. I love to campaign, Mrs. Chisholm says. Assemblywoman Chisholm addresses the New York State Legislature. Mrs. Chisholm spent 4 years in Albany representing her Bedford-Stuyvesant community in the state legislature. She left to run for Congress after establishing a reputation for always doing her homework and never being afraid to jump into a debate. Famous victory photo of Shirley Chisholm, taken the night she won the election to Congress. Mrs. Chisholm fooled the experts and beat her Republican opponent, James Farmer, by 2.5 to 1. Serious people power. Serious. Husband Conrad pins an orchid to his victorious wife. Photo was taken in Washington on the day Shirley was sworn into office. I never could have done it without Conrad, the congresswoman says. Outgoing President Lyndon Baines Johnson greets incoming Congresswoman Shirley Chisholm during her first week in Washington. As a child, Shirley wondered if her picture would ever be taken with a United States president. Isn't this just a wonderful piece of treasure? I'm really just chuffed I have this, you know? Hi, Grace. Good you're here. Lise says, yeah. I know, I didn't learn about Shirley until I was an adult, which is she's the first Black congresswoman in the United States. She's an important historical figure. Why were we not taught about Shirley? I'll tell you why we weren't taught about Shirley. Her politics were fucking awesome. That's why. They don't want those politics back in Washington. Nation's first Black woman congressman, first Black woman congressman. They need to work on that. Congresswoman is sworn into office by John McCormick, then Speaker of the House of Representatives. Mrs. Chisholm and Mr. McCormick later had a difference of opinion over her House committee assignment, but they remain friends. I just love this photo of her too. On the steps of the Capitol, Congresswoman Shirley Chisholm pauses for a moment's reflection. She carries with her the material she plans to use in a speech before her House colleagues. She socks it to them, one newspaper said of her. Congresswoman Chisholm waits to testify at a congressional hearing with two fellow Democrats, John Conyers and Charles C. Diggs, Jr. Both men are congressmen from the state of Michigan. Congresswoman Chisholm, I set my timer just to keep myself kind of paced, but we're good. We still have time. Congresswoman Chisholm addresses a news conference. She is flanked by three other Democratic congressmen from New York, Allard K. Lowenstein, Edward L. Koch, and William Fitz Ryan. Representative Chisholm meets with group that came to Washington to protest cuts in poverty program. Mrs. Chisholm speaks out tirelessly for a massive manpower training program and for more aid to education. Her heavy speaking schedule around the nation when Congress is not in session keeps her continuously on the go. Congresswoman Chisholm shared a laugh with Robert Finch, who was President Nixon's Secretary for Health, Education, and Welfare. Finch was a Republican, but he sought out Mrs. Chisholm's views on education. Part of the Democratic Congresswoman's job in Washington is getting along with the Republican administration. Representative Chisholm breaks party ranks and endorses John Lindsay, a liberal, for mayor of New York City. The fearless Mrs. Chisholm campaigned actively for Lindsay, who won re-election. Like most other members of Congress from New York, Shirley Chisholm returns to her district on weekends. Here she meets with constituents in her Brooklyn office. Congresswoman Chisholm talks to voters in her 12th congressional district. I never forget that it is the people who elected me, she says. And I love the way she's just... natural. Just so natural. During a visit to a housing project in her congressional district, Mrs. Chisholm stops to chat with some neighborhood children who easily recognized her. "I know you. You're Shirley Chisholm. You're my congressman," one of them said. Oh, goodness. Okay, one more picture. Mrs. Chisholm paused to chat with her husband Conrad during a stroll through her district. She needs someone to watch out for the details, to look out for her, and see to it that she eats and sleeps properly, Conrad said. All right, I'm connected again. Okay. I've never had my live stream go out like this before. It's interesting, but we'll just chalk it up to Mercury retrograde. In the Education Committee and on the floor of the Assembly, Shirley talked long and hard about how the need for special scholarships for Negro and Puerto Rican youths to give them the same opportunities that more privileged white youths received. She spoke from her own experience about what education had done for her, and she spoke of others less fortunate than she who were trapped in dead-end jobs for life because they could not get a higher education. It makes me sick and angry to think of the hundreds and thousands of brains that have been lost to America because they never had an opportunity to go to college, she told the Assembly. The Sikh bill will give funds to Negro and Puerto Rican youths who show that they have the potential. A lot of these young people come from ghetto schools with poor curriculums and teachers who think that their students must be inferior because they are black. They graduate with dead-end vocational diplomas. They are not to compete with white children for college scholarships. These children are the victims of discrimination and segregation. We must show them that there is hope for them in this land. Shirley's words moved her fellow assemblymen. The Sikh program got its money. In the first 2 years of operation, 8,000 young people were granted Sikh scholarships to New York colleges. A black woman in Congress? Okay, I want to read this bit to you, and then I might kind of skip through a little bit more, but I read this when I was flipping through before, and I was just really moved by it. In 1968, the New York State Legislature set up a committee to redraw some of the congressional district lines in central Brooklyn. While they were at it, the big political leaders decided that since the black population of Brooklyn was quite large and all the congressmen from Brooklyn were white, it made sense to redraw the lines in such a way that one new congressional district in Brooklyn was built around the black neighborhood of Bedford-Stuyvesant. That way, it was assured that the next election in Brooklyn would be sending a black representative to Congress for the first time in history. The new congressional district was to be known as the 12th CD. Even before the boundaries of the new 12th were made public, the neighborhood of Bedford-Stuyvesant was buzzing with the news. A black representative in Congress from Bedford-Stuyvesant? The only other black man in Congress from the state of New York was Adam Clayton Powell, who represented Harlem. Now he would be joined by someone from Brooklyn. Who would the new representative be? The newspapers ran several stories filled with names and speculations. A certain well-known minister was picking up support. A certain civil rights leader was said to be interested. On and on the speculation went. Whom would the Democrats choose as their candidate? Would the party leaders get together and select one candidate, or would there be a primary fight? Whom would the Republicans choose? What would the Liberal Party do? Okay, this is incredible. One cold evening in February, when Shirley returned to Brooklyn from her week's work in Albany, she heard the front doorbell ring. "Are we expecting anybody?" she asked Conrad as she went to the door. Standing on the front stoop was an elderly Negro woman. "Mrs. Chisholm," the lady said. My friends and I know what you've been doing for us up there in Albany. We want you to run for Congress from this neighborhood. We collected this money and we want to give it to you for a campaign contribution." Shirley was flabbergasted. She ushered the woman inside the house. "It isn't much," said the woman as she offered Shirley an envelope. "We don't have much to give, but it's a beginning and we're going to go out and collect more." Oh, this is so sad. Inside the envelope, Shirley found $9.62. All in coins. Yeah. With tears streaming down her face, she hugged the lady tightly. "I know what this money means to you," she whispered. "We'll make it together, you and I." Later that night, after the woman had left, Shirley carefully wrapped the envelope of coins in a handkerchief and put it away in the top drawer of her dresser. "I'm going to keep this envelope intact always," she said to Conrad. "That woman has probably spent her whole life working as a domestic. She could have been my own mother. Women like that are worth more to me than the opinions of 1,000 politicians." I've been wondering when you were going to start thinking about that congressional seat," Conrad replied. "Oh, I've been thinking about it all right," Shirley said. "The black legislators in Albany have been talking about nothing else for months." "Your assembly district is the heart of the new congressional district," Conrad said with a smile as he lit his pipe. "It seems to me that you'd be the logical choice of the party leaders." "Never," Shirley replied. "I'm too independent for them. I'd never be the choice of the Brooklyn County organization. I've walked out of meetings of party leaders here and in Albany when I haven't liked the position they were taking. I've never been in favor with the bigwigs in the Brooklyn organization. They'll want someone for that congressional seat that they think they can control." "The Unity Club is behind you 100%. We know that," Conrad said thoughtfully. "I wonder what the other clubs in the district will be doing." "I saw a map of the new 12th in Albany last week," Shirley reported. "The district goes clear up to the Queens line. It takes in parts of Williamsburg, Crown Heights, and Bushwick. Those districts are controlled by white leaders. I expect that the white leaders won't try to field a candidate of their own, but you can be sure that they'll all get together behind one of the black candidates, and it won't be me." "I've never known you to be so pessimistic." "I'm just being realistic," reported Shirley. "The white male leaders will feel more comfortable dealing with a black man than they will with a black woman. It's as simple as that. Besides, they'll think they're being super liberal by supporting a male candidate. All that talk about the need to strengthen the image of black men is going to make them try to stop Shirley Chisholm. You mark my words. That will be their solution to the problems of Bedford-Stuyvesant. Put a man in the office, as if we black women have never held important political jobs." "Well, the women of Bedford-Stuyvesant might feel as angry about this male business as you do," Conrad said to his wife. "The women have always supported your candidacy. If the lady who came to the door tonight isn't any indication, they want you to run." A few evenings later, Conrad came home to find his wife poring over a set of large books. "I see you wasted no time in getting hold of the election rolls," he said to Shirley with a grin. "Before you tell me anything, I've got something to tell you. I was walking down Fulton Street today, and I saw a Jones for Congress storefront that had just opened up. Your old friend, Judge Tom Jones, apparently would like to run for Congress, too." Shirley raised her eyebrows. "I heard that Tom was interested," she replied, "and I heard he has a powerful friend in his corner." "What do you mean?" "From what I understand, Senator Robert Kennedy and Jones are very close," Shirley said with a sigh. "If Kennedy comes into this district to campaign for Tom, it might swing a lot of votes." "I don't think Kennedy would interfere with a local race," Conrad said slowly. "That's not good politics. Besides, your name carries as much weight in Bedford-Stuyvesant as Kennedy's does. The people here know you and know what you've done for them." "It really hurts me," Shirley went on, "that in all the years I've been in politics here, Robert Kennedy never sought me out." Maybe there were some people who kept him from you, Conrad offered. You know how politicians are. If he had asked me, I'd have told him the person to see in Bedford-Stuyvesant is named Shirley Chisholm. Well, I guess I shouldn't brood about it, Shirley said with a shrug. Conrad changed the subject. What else have you learned so far from studying the election rolls? Shirley lit up instantly. It's fascinating, Conrad. You can tell so much about a neighborhood from just looking at the names of the registered voters. Bedford-Stuyvesant is mostly all black. We know that already. The 12th CD seems to have a lot of Italians in the Bushwick section and a lot of Jews in Crown Heights. And I'm amazed at how many Puerto Rican names show up on the election rolls in Williamsburg. You've always gotten along well with all kinds of people, Conrad said as he leafed through the pages, and you'll probably be the only candidate who can speak Spanish fluently. You do very well with the Puerto Rican vote. That's what I'm counting on, Shirley agreed. There's something else here, Conrad, that is very interesting. I want to examine it more closely. What did you discover? I haven't done any arithmetic yet, so I don't have the exact figures, but it appears there are thousands more women voters in this district than men. That is interesting, Conrad agreed. The women voters have always been fierce about you, Shirley. The 12th CD is looking better all the time. Shirley Chisholm announced her candidacy for Congress the following week. Shortly afterward, a fellow legislator from Bedford-Stuyvesant, State Senator William C. Thompson, declared he was also in the race. Neither announcement got any attention in the city's newspapers or on television. A few weeks later, when the Chisholms were eating a quiet dinner at home, a friend from the Unity Club telephoned. Quick, Shirley, turn on the TV to the evening news, the friend said hurriedly. Shirley switched on the television set. She and Conrad watched as James Farmer, the former national director of CORE, the Congress of Racial Equality, declared his candidacy for Congress from Brooklyn's 12th District. Shirley and Conrad looked unbelievingly at the television screen. Bet he doesn't live in Brooklyn, Shirley sputtered. He lives in Manhattan. They're certainly giving him a big play on the evening news, Conrad remarked. The Chisholms listened as Farmer gave his reasons for entering the race. So he says that the rats and roaches don't stop at the Brooklyn Bridge, Shirley said bitterly. Well, why doesn't he do something about the rats in Harlem? Why is he so interested in Bedford-Stuyvesant all of a sudden? Calm down, Conrad said to his wife. He's only got the Liberal Party nomination. The Liberals don't carry much weight in Bedford-Stuyvesant. He's starting out with the Liberal nomination, Shirley replied. Maybe he'll pick up the Republican nomination as well. Or maybe he thinks we'll all fold up and get the Democratic nomination too. Don't you think the local Republicans will want to name their own candidate? Conrad asked. You heard the television commenter call him a national figure. Farmer's entry into the race might change the whole picture. What are you going to do about it? I'm going to call a campaign meeting for tomorrow night. I'd better get right on the telephone, so it's not only going to be a tough primary fight, it's going to be a battle up until November. Where's my telephone book? I've got to tell some people that the time has come. We've got to go to war. This is fighting, Shirley Chisholm. The first order of business is putting together a good campaign committee, Shirley said proudly to Conrad, and I've certainly done that. I deserve to win just because the people who are supporting me are so good. Shirley had asked her old friend Wesley Holder to be her campaign manager, and Holder, now in his early 70s, had plotted the campaign strategy. Everyone agreed that Shirley's base of strength was her own 55th Assembly District. That was the district she represented in Albany, and everybody in the neighborhood knew her. The Unity Democratic Club was solidly behind her, and the district leader, Thomas R. Fortune, could be counted on to turn out a large vote for Shirley Chisholm. First things first, Holder said to Shirley. Our job is to win the Democratic primary. If you take the primary against the other Democratic candidates, you'll have no trouble at all winning the general election. This district has always been heavily Democratic, so the winner of the primary should sail through the general election in November. That means that Tommy Fortune has to get out every available vote in the 55th. Don't worry about the 55th, Fortune had assured them. Everybody in the club and the neighborhood is behind Shirley. We'll be out ringing doorbells every night of the week till primary day. Shirley will carry this part of her new congressional district by better than 3-1. Shirley smiled happily. She knew that she could count on Tommy Fortune and her friends in unity. What about the other sections of the new 12th CD? Where they don't know me personally, she asked Holder. Have you figured out a battle plan? You're going to get an organization of your women supporters together, Holder said enthusiastically. The women will fan out over the entire district with shopping bags full of campaign leaflets. You, Shirley, will be out on a sound truck in a good deal of the time, acquainting the voters with your personality and your stand on the issues. I guess we'll be wanting bumper stickers, too, Conrad put it. Signs that say Chisholm for Congress that people can stick on their car bumpers. The bumper stickers and the leaflets and the sound truck will take a lot of money, though, won't they? Most of the money will be raised from people in the 12th Congressional District who want to see Shirley Chisholm in Congress, Holder said thoughtfully. But it would be helpful if Shirley can scare up some money from some of her citywide contacts. I don't expect that we're going to get any money from this primary fight from the Brooklyn Democratic County organization. Not likely, Shirley laughed. Since the organization is not supporting my candidacy, I think I know someone, Wesley, who might do some fundraising for me. His name is Julius Edelstein, and we work together very closely in Albany to push through the Sikh program. He sounds like a good bet, Holder said with a nod. Now the next item on our agenda is to settle on a good campaign slogan, one that sums up a few words what your candidacy is all about. Got any ideas, Shirley? Shirley thought for a minute before she spoke. Well, since the big party leaders aren't supporting me because they can't control my votes, and since everyone knows I always speak my own mind, how about unbought and unbossed for a campaign slogan? Wesley Holder nodded vigorously. Unbought and unbossed. Suits you to a T, Shirley. That's what it'll be. Shirley's opponents in the Democratic primary were State Senator William C. Thompson and Dolly Robinson, a former State Labor Department official. Thomas R. Jones had dropped out of the race to run instead for a state Supreme Court judgeship. Shirley's campaign organization got underway. The day of the primary was set for June 18th. Speaking to voters from the top of a sound truck was nothing new to Shirley Chisholm. Her races for the state assembly had given her plenty of experience with campaigns. I really like to campaign, Shirley told Conrad one weekend evening when she had spent the entire day making short street corner speeches to voters in the new 12th Congressional District. The people really listen to what I have to say. It's important to get close to the voters, to let them see you, and to shake their hands. Shirley and Conrad and some of the members of the Chisholm campaign staff rode the sound truck from stop to stop. Other members of the candidates' team rode behind them in private cars. The Chisholm campaign caravan looked impressive. The people have to know that I have a good organization of supporters behind me, Shirley told her campaign workers. The street corner meetings were tough and exhausting. Sometimes while Shirley was at the microphone, a heckler would walk by and interrupt her speech with a cat call. Shirley had to have a smart answer ready for him, or else there might be jeers and laughter and the meeting would get out of hand. Shirley's favorite campaign stops were at the public housing projects. Her campaign caravan would drive right into one of the streets of the big projects, and Shirley would take her microphone. Ladies and gentlemen of the Brevoort houses, this is Fighting Shirley Chisholm coming through, she would announce in a firm, strong voice. Her opening statement over the loudspeaker and the sight of the campaign cars covered with Chisholm stickers were usually enough to draw a crowd at the projects. While Shirley was talking to the residents of the housing project and reminding them to come out and vote for her on primary day, her campaign workers would scatter through the crowd with their shopping bags full of campaign leaflets. By the time Shirley had finished her speech, the crowd had always tripled in size, and her campaign staff had handed out something like 2,000 leaflets. Then Shirley would climb down from the sound truck and begin to shake hands. She knew so many of the voters who lived in the projects that she always got a warm welcome from them. They in turn were always pleased that a candidate for Congress had taken the trouble to visit them right where they had lived. Judging from the response at the projects, I don't think I'm going to do too badly in this campaign, Shirley said to Conrad after a particularly successful afternoon at the projects. Shirley didn't like to admit that she was worried. Her longtime ally, Tommy Fortune, had told her that most of the other political leaders in the 12th Congressional District considered State Senator Thompson to be an easy winner. They're even willing to bet money, Fortune had laughed. What do you think? Shirley had asked the Unity Club's leader. I think you'll make it, Fortune had asked. In fact, I think I'm going to take some of those bets. I'd like to win a little money in the primary day. The third black candidate in the race, Dolly Robinson, didn't bother Shirley. Some people think that Dolly's going to cut into my vote because she's a woman, she told Conrad, but I don't think so. Dolly's from the same part of the district as Willie Thompson, and I think they're going to hurt each other, not me. There was a serious complication to the primary race, however, and Shirley was well aware of it. That spring, the nation's eyes were on the presidential primaries. In the Democratic Party, the fighting was particularly bitter. Shirley watched the contest for the Democratic presidential nomination with keen interest. First, there was Senator Eugene McCarthy of Minnesota. Boo. Who surprised everyone by almost beating President Lyndon Johnson in New Hampshire. Then Senator Robert Kennedy of New York announced that he was going to challenge President Johnson. After that, President Johnson startled the nation by declaring he was not going to run for president again, at all. And soon Vice President Hubert Humphrey announced that he was now the candidate for president. The war in Vietnam is really pulling the Democratic Party apart, Shirley said sorrowfully to Conrad. I wouldn't be surprised if it cost us the presidential election in November. Over the last year, Shirley had begun to question the Vietnam War. I don't understand a country that spends billions of dollars to fight a war thousands of miles from our shores, when right here at home there isn't enough money to fight sickness, hunger, and unemployment, she told voters from the sound truck. As strongly as Shirley felt about the war and other national issues, she didn't think that it was good politics for her to identify herself publicly with any of the candidates who were trying to run for the Democratic presidential nomination. I want the people in this district to choose one of the three of us for Congress on the basis of who we are, not on whom we're supporting for president, she used to say at meetings. 2 weeks before the New York primary, tragedy struck in California. Robert Kennedy was shot down by an assassin's bullet. Kennedy's assassination had come 2 months after the assassination of Dr. Martin Luther King. It was a bad time for the country. No one in New York or in the rest of the nation could think about campaigns and politics. The city was still numb from the shock of Kennedy's assassination when primary day, June 18th, rolled around. All day long, Shirley's supporters worked to get out the vote in the 12th Congressional District. By the time the polls closed in the evening, slightly more than 12,000 registered Democrats had gone into the voting booths. The turnout had been small, there was no denying it, but the important question was, which candidate got the most votes? The counting of the votes went quickly. Each small election district had a modern voting machine, and when the back of the machine was opened up by the election inspectors, the number of votes Shirley and each of the others had received was clearly marked on the automatic counters. The election inspectors carefully marked down the numbers on their official forms, and the forms were taken down to the Board of Elections with a police escort. Unless the vote is very close, politicians never wait for the official results to be announced by the Board of Elections. They want to know immediately who has won so they can station poll watchers at each polling place. The poll watchers copy down the figures from each voting machine at the same time. The official election inspectors record the figures, and then the poll watchers run back to the candidates' headquarters with the precious information. At Shirley's campaign headquarters, Wesley Holder sat at a desk with long sheets of paper in front of him. As the poll watchers brought in the results from each small election district, each precinct in the 12th Congressional District, he entered the figures in 3 columns labeled Chisholm, Thompson, and Robinson. The all-important figures for Shirley's old assembly district came in first. Holder turned to Shirley with a big smile. "You're carrying the 55th by better than 3-1, he told the candidate. "The Unity Club really did its job." Shirley looked over the figures and nodded. She was too nervous to speak. There were 54 small election districts in the 55th Assembly District, and she had done beautifully in all of them. Now the important question was whether she would hold her own in the rest of the congressional district, where she wasn't as well known. Shirley's headquarters was turning into a madhouse as more and more campaign workers came to report results from the outlying districts. The smell of victory was in the air. Finally, Holder stood up and chalked the totals on a big blackboard. Chisholm, 5,680. Thompson, 4,907. Robinson, 1,848. A roar went up from Shirley's campaign workers. Shirley Chisholm had won the Democratic nomination for Congress. The victorious candidate had won half of her battle. The general election in November remained to be won. When Shirley and Conrad went home late that night, they had a very serious matter to discuss between them. Shirley's health had gotten run down during the hard months of campaigning, and she and Conrad knew that she would have to enter the hospital for an operation. Shirley had postponed it as long as she could. Shirley entered the hospital in July. She was back on her feet, but frail and weak in August. The National Democratic Convention was held in Chicago at the end of August. Shirley decided not to attend because she felt the trip would be too strenuous for her health. But something happened to make her change her mind. Tommy Fortune called from Chicago to say that the Democrats wanted to elect her as National Committee woman from the state of New York, an important party office. Still weak, Shirley was bundled onto a plane and flown to Chicago for the honor. The Democrats' convention turned out to be a violent event as the Chicago police battled war protesters in the street. Yeah, that was a big one, wasn't it? That was 68. That was yeah. Oh, okay. Making connections. Yeah. She watched the battles. Okay, so wait. The Democrats' convention turned out to be a violent event as the Chicago police battled war protesters in the streets. Shirley never ventured outside of her hotel room. She watched the battles in the streets and the politicking inside the convention hall on a television set in her room. When New York's delegation elected her National Committee woman, she got the news from Tommy Fortune on the telephone. On the last day of the convention, the Democrats nominated Hubert Humphrey and Edmund Muskie as their candidates for president and vice president. The violence in Chicago had left a bad taste in everyone's mouth. As Shirley flew back to New York, she couldn't help but wonder how much the events in Chicago would hurt the Democratic candidates against the Republicans, Richard Nixon and Spiro Agnew. Back in Brooklyn, Shirley's campaign organization began preparing for Stage 2, the general election in November. Shirley's major opponent was James Farmer, who had gotten the Republican nomination as well as the Liberal Party nomination. The Conservative Party had put up a white man named Ralph J. Carano, but nobody gave him much of a chance. Campaign manager Holder gave Shirley his thinking on the kind of campaign they needed to wage. Farmer's strategy is going to be that you're a gracious lady with the right ideas, but that the 12th Congressional District needs a man for the job, he told her. He's going to appeal to the top of the pyramid, to the intellectuals who have followed his career in the newspapers. Now, Shirley, don't waste your time trying to reach those voters. There aren't that many of them. You concentrate on the broad base of the pyramid that has all the average voters who know you as a local figure. Shirley nodded in agreement. I checked the election rolls long before I got into this race, she said to Holder, and my research turned up the fact that there are about 12,000 more women voters registered in this district than men. Farmer's strategy might just backfire on him at that. Shirley was still recovering from her operation, so she could do a little of the rugged street campaigning she had done for the primary. The few speeches that she did give were at indoor meetings at some political and social clubs, and at churches and synagogues in the neighborhood. Now that she was the regular Democratic candidate for Congress, Brooklyn's County Democratic Organization, which had ignored her in the primary, came forward to help her by arranging meetings in the white parts of the district. Her opponent's campaign, by contrast, was loud and noisy. Farmer's campaign managers used bongo players to drum up a crowd for the candidate's street meetings. The young men who handed out his leaflets often wore dashikis, the African-style shirt that was becoming popular among the young militants. Oh, goodness. That's a damn shame. As Wesley Holder had predicted, Farmer's speeches and his leaflets stressed the need for a man's voice in Washington. One of Shirley's close supporters came to her one day and said, "You'd better get back on the streets with your sound truck, Mrs. Chisholm. That farmer is making hay out there with the voters." Shirley shook her head. Whenever she and Farmer met face to face for a debate, her positions were just as militant as his were, and the people who listened knew that she could do more than hold her own with him, despite her being a mere woman. Besides the fact, there were 3 other reasons why she felt confident she would win in November by continuing with her quiet kind of campaigning. First, she had her women and men supporters who, in Conrad's words, were fierce about her. Second, she knew from talking to people in the neighborhood that many voters resented the fact that Farmer, who lived in Manhattan, had come to Brooklyn to run for Congress. "It's saying to the people here that you have nobody worthwhile for this $30,000 fruitcake," she often said in her speeches. The annual salary for a congressman was then $30,000. Third, Shirley knew that Central Brooklyn had always voted heavily Democratic, and she was the regular Democratic candidate. With these factors going for her, how could she lose? In Shirley's logical mind, it was all very simple. But to her constant annoyance, the city's newspapers and television news programs continued to ignore her while they played up her opponent's candidacy. "The only newspaper that seems to know I'm alive is the Amsterdam News," she said irritably to Conrad one day. One weekend, they watched a national television news special about the campaign in Brooklyn's 12th congressional district. The half-hour network program was mostly devoted to James Farmer. There were only a few scenes of Shirley's campaign. After the show, some of Shirley's supporters called the television station to complain. They were told that since Shirley's opponent was a quote-unquote national figure, and since his campaign was quote-unquote so colorful, the program had concentrated on him. Shirley burned, but there was nothing she could do about it. "After you win in November, you're going to be the national figure, Shirley," her husband said to console her. Election day, November 5th, 1968, finally arrived. Shirley's campaign organization worked smoothly to turn out the vote. By this time, they were experienced hands at getting voters to the polls. The lines at the polling places were long, and the voters often had to wait for more than an hour before they could go in to cast their votes. In Shirley's own election district, she had the opportunity to vote for several familiar names. Thomas R. Jones was on the ballot for state Supreme Court judge, and Thomas R. Fortune was on the ballot for assemblyman, and there, in prominent spot on the machine, was the name, Shirley Chisholm for congressman. Shirley and Conrad voted early in the morning. Then Shirley toured the other polling places in her district with some of her campaign workers to say hello to the election inspectors and poll watchers she knew. "It's been a long campaign," Shirley said to the Conrad at dinner. "It's been 9 months since I first announced for Congress, and 6 months since I started to campaign actively for the nomination. Well, I've done everything I could do to convince the voters that I'm the right choice. If the people don't want me, I guess I can always go back to being a professional educator." The polls stayed open till 10 o'clock that night. Early in the evening, Shirley went to her campaign headquarters and climbed a flight of stairs that led to a small private room. Downstairs, some of her supporters were fixing things up for a victory celebration, but Shirley was too nervous to see anybody. She preferred to stay upstairs with her husband and a few close friends until the election was decided. Shortly before midnight, there was no longer any doubt about the outcomes of the race for Congress in Brooklyn's new 12th congressional district. Shirley Chisholm was the winner. She had been overwhelmingly elected by the people in her district to represent them in the United States Congress in Washington. The final figures were Shirley Chisholm, Democrat, 35,239. James Farmer, who had the Republican and Liberal vote, had 13,615 votes. And Ralph Carano, the Conservative, had 4,079 votes. 2.5 to 1, baby. Ugh. With tears in her eyes, Shirley walked downstairs to greet her campaign workers. A roar went up from the crowded hall as she made her entrance. It was a proud moment in American history. Shirley Chisholm was the first Black person to be elected to Congress from the borough of Brooklyn. Even more significant, Shirley Chisholm was the first Black woman to be elected to Congress in the entire nation. She had done it with the help of her close supporters, but the victory was truly hers. She had worked for many years to reach her goal. The campaign headquarters was in a turmoil. Their own Shirley Chisholm had won. She was going to Congress. The television and newspaper reporters who had ignored her for the past 9 months were swarming around her for interviews. CBS, NBC, and ABC wanted to put her immediately on network television. The New York Times, the Daily News, the New York Post, the Associated Press, and the Amsterdam News all wanted a statement. The photographers were busy snapping her victory photographs. Shirley held up a V for Victory sign. When the crowd quieted down a little, she began to speak. "I never could have done it without the help of my husband, Conrad," she said quietly. "He stood by me 100%, all the way. It is a great honor to be chosen as the nation's first Black Congresswoman. As a United States representative in Washington, I intend to represent all the people, the Blacks, the whites, the men, the women, and especially the youth. There are many new ideas abroad in this country, and I intend to speak for those ideas, and my voice will be heard." First Black Congresswoman. The telephone never stopped ringing at the Chisholm house from the moment Shirley's victory was announced. Shirley and Conrad took turns answering it. Sometimes the caller was a dear, close friend who wanted to offer personal congratulations. But more often, the caller was a newspaper, television, or radio reporter who wanted an exclusive interview about what it was like to be the first Black woman ever elected to the United States Congress. The reporters were not only from New York City, they called from across the nation. Shirley Chisholm had indeed become a national figure overnight. Shirley tried to say no to some of their requests for interviews, but it was a losing battle. Reporters, she discovered, were very persistent when they wanted a story, and Shirley Chisholm was news. Reporters on newspapers in Israel, France, and Germany came to her house to see her. Ebony did a cover story on her, and so did the New York Times Magazine. A British writer did a whole chapter on her life story for a book he was writing on the 1968 campaign. Even Vogue magazine asked her to come to their studios for a formal photograph. And then there were the young student reporters who represented their high school and college newspapers. Shirley found she could never say no to student journalists. After 2 weeks of nonstop interviews, Shirley's throat was sore from all the talking. She and Conrad flew to Jamaica to visit with Conrad's relatives and hopefully to get some needed relaxation. But even on the island of Jamaica, Shirley was now an important celebrity. Reporters and well-wishers followed the Chisholms wherever they went, walking in the city of Kingston. Shirley's picture had been in the newspapers, and everybody seemed to recognize her. They all wanted to kiss her or shake her hand. Back in New York again, more interviews. While the Chisholms had been away, Leslie Holder had received more than 500 letters and telegrams from newspapers, magazines, and radio and television stations that wanted special interviews. Each one, it seemed, had a different angle. The political reporters wanted a political interview. The women's page reporters wanted a special slant on Shirley Chisholm as a woman. The reporters from the National Negro Press naturally wanted a story on the newest black representative in Congress. Things were happening so fast that Shirley could hardly catch her breath. One of the last acts that the old session of Congress attended to was a salary raise for its members for the coming year. Shirley had thought that she had been elected to a $30,000 a year position, but the United States Congress upped the salary for representatives to $42,500. That's almost 3 times as much as I was making in Albany as a state assemblywoman, Shirley said proudly to Conrad. Now we can pool our resources and buy that home of our own that we've been dreaming of. Shirley and Conrad found a lovely 9-room attached row house on St. John's Place, just a few blocks from their old rented home. The people who sold the house to them also sold them a fine baby grand piano that occupied a place of honor in the living room. Shirley had less than a month left before she would be officially inaugurated into office in the beginning of January. She and Conrad moved into the new house and began the job of decorating the living room. The upstairs rooms are just going to have to wait, she said to her husband. I don't know when I'm going to find time to unpack the rest of these cartons. The Chisholms went to Washington to find an apartment for Shirley to live in while Congress was in session. I think I'd better take something already furnished, Shirley said to Conrad. My real home will always be Brooklyn, in the 12th Congressional District. She found a furnished efficiency suite that looked nice enough and signed the lease. Shirley's next chore was to find a competent, experienced staff for her Washington congressional office. Since I won't know my way around the Capitol for the first month or so, I'd like to hire a staff that is already familiar with the workings of Congress, Shirley said to Congressman Joseph Resnick one day. Resnick had an idea. He himself had not run for re-election. His own staff was excellent, and the girls were looking for jobs for the coming term. Shirley interviewed Resnick's staff and decided to hire 3 of them. Travis Kane, a young black woman from Texas, would be her administrative assistant. Shirley Downs, a young white woman from upstate New York, would be her legislative assistant. Blonde, friendly Karen McCory, the 3rd girl from Resnick's office, was hired to handle casework. The new congresswoman found the perfect personal secretary in Carolyn Jones, a sophisticated young black woman who came from the office of Representative Charles Whalen of Ohio. I think you have the youngest, prettiest congressional staff in Washington, Conrad said, laughing when he was introduced to all the girls. They work well together as a team, Shirley answered, and that's what's important. Shirley was assigned to a convenient street floor suite in the Longworth building. She and Conrad went to look it over. There was an outer office for her staff and a large private office for her. The 435 United States representatives were spread out in 3 separate office buildings, all connected to each other and to the house side of the Capitol building by a system of tunnels, elevators, escalators, and passageways. Shirley and Conrad did some exploring and promptly got lost in a maze of marble corridors. Washington. In January 1969, President Richard Nixon and the 91st Congress were sworn into office. The inauguration was an exciting time for Shirley. Congressman Adam Clayton Powell came over to kiss her hand as she entered the House of Representatives, and outgoing President Lyndon B. Johnson was photographed giving her a bear hug at an evening dance. Shirley paid for a chartered bus so that her friends and neighbors from Bedford-Stuyvesant could share the historic occasion with her. In addition to Shirley, 2 other new black congressmen were sworn into office. Louis Stokes of Cleveland, Ohio, and William Clay of St. Louis, Missouri, became the first black men of their states to join the House of Representatives. That brought the number of Negro representatives in Congress to 9. As Ebony magazine put it, 9 black members in the House of Representatives was hardly an explosion of political power, but nevertheless it was a real gain. Shirley's first weeks in Washington were hectic as she adjusted to her new schedule. Like the other congressmen from New York, Shirley flew back and forth on the airline shuttle, arriving in Washington on Sunday night and returning to her Brooklyn home on Thursday evening. Since she had traveled to Albany every week for her work in the state assembly, the long-distance commuting was familiar to her. The reporters in Washington were just as eager for interviews with the first black congresswoman as the reporters in New York had been. Shirley had tried to limit her interviews to 1 a day, but she wasn't always successful. The reporters never gave up. One of the newspaper headlines that she really enjoyed read, "First Black Woman Will Sock It to Congress." The television people came up with all sorts of ideas to make each interview with Shirley Chisholm a little different from all the others. One reporter asked if she could film an interview with Shirley while the first black congresswoman was standing in the kitchen doing her ironing. After thinking it over, Shirley refused to do that particular interview. The new congresswoman's office staff could barely keep up with the telephone calls, telegrams, and mail that came into the office every day. The congratulations on Shirley's victory were still pouring in from around the country. One Sunday evening, when Shirley flew back to Washington after a weekend in New York, she had a terrible shock. When she entered her Washington apartment, she discovered that it had been burglarized in her absence. The thief or thieves had made off with all her clothes, the new knitted suits and coats in pretty pastel colors that she had bought to wear in the House of Representatives. Shirley called the police to report the burglary. She also made plans to move to a new address. The following day, 2 reporters found out about the theft and broke the story in the afternoon papers. That brought a whole new group of reporters to her office looking for more facts about the burglary. Everything that happened to Shirley Chisholm was considered important news. Shirley decided that she had better things to talk about to a newspaperman than the theft of her Washington wardrobe. "Everything I have to say I've already reported to the police," she said firmly. "Some of my friends are going to help me select new clothes, and they're going to be prettier than the ones that were stolen." That finished the matter as far as Shirley Chisholm was concerned. She kept her new address and telephone number out of the newspapers. One of the speaking engagements that Shirley accepted with pleasure was the Delta Sigma Theta sorority, an organization of Negro college graduates and professional women. At a luncheon meeting of Delta held at the Americana Hotel in New York, Shirley was initiated into the sorority. Then she gave her speech. "Everyone in Washington tells me I'm just a fresh congressman and you're supposed to keep quiet as a freshman," she told the women. "I listen sweetly to them, and then I say, 'Thank you for your advice, gentlemen. But when I get up there on that floor of Congress, I'm sure you understand that I'm speaking with the pent-up emotions of the community.'" The audience applauded her warmly, and Shirley went on. "One thing the people in New York and Washington are afraid of in Shirley Chisholm is her mouth." Shirley's speech that day proved to be prophetic. When she returned to Washington the following Monday, she found herself involved in her first congressional fight. Shirley and the other freshman Democrats had been patiently waiting for their committee assignments. Congress is run by the committee system, and unless a congressman is put on a good committee, there is little he or she can contribute in way of legislation. Shirley understood the importance of getting on a good committee because of her experience in the state legislature in Albany, where her position on the Education Committee had helped to pass the Sikh legislation. There were several committees in Congress that she thought she would like to serve on, committees to which she thought she could make an important contribution. Several black residents of the city of Washington urged her to try for an appointment to the House Committee on the District of Columbia. The district committee watched over the affairs of the city of Washington, and since 60% of Washington's population is black, a black legislator on the district's committee would make a great understanding of the problems and needs of Washington. But Shirley had her heart set on House Education and Labor Committee. Her background in the field of education, the many years she spent as an administrator of New York's child care program, and her experience on the Education Committee in the state legislature were excellent qualifications for the Education and Labor Committee of the House of Representatives. Besides, Shirley told herself, if she were put on the Education Committee, she could work for a national Sikh program similar to the one she helped to put forward in New York State. Shirley's new friends in Congress told her that her chances of getting on the Education Committee were very slim. Education was an important and powerful committee. The positions on it generally went to congressmen who had been in Washington for many years. That was the meaning of seniority, a word Shirley heard often in Washington. The best committee assignments went to members of Congress with seniority. And the congressmen with the most seniority, Shirley discovered, were the Southerners, many of whom had served in Washington for more than 20 years. Ugh. Shirley was undaunted. She wrote a letter to the chairman of the Education Committee outlining her qualifications and experience. She concluded her letter by respectfully requesting that she be considered for a spot on the committee. Maybe if I explain it to them very nicely, she told Conrad, they'll make an exception to the seniority practice and give me the assignment. Shirley received a short note of reply from the Education Committee's chairman. It said that her letter had been received, and it thanked her for her interest. But Shirley soon learned where the power lay. Representative Wilbur Mills of Arkansas, the chairman of the House Ways and Means Committee, was the man who assigned his fellow Democrats to the various committees. Mills decided to ignore the wishes of the nation's first black congresswoman. He put Shirley Chisholm on a House Agriculture Subcommittee on Forestry and Rural Villages. Okay. Put a woman from Bed-Stuy on a Committee for Forestry and Rural Villages. How efficient. What an efficient use of someone's knowledge base. Okay. Can you imagine that? Shirley sputtered to Conrad when she heard the news. Forestry and rural villages? What has that got to do with Bedford-Stuyvesant? I guess all the gentlemen in Washington know about Brooklyn is that a tree once grew there. Shirley was hurt and upset. She talked over her bad luck on the committee assignment with some other freshman congressmen from New York delegation. They hadn't done much better, but they didn't care to make a fight over it. The more Shirley thought about it, however, the angrier she became. I was elected to Congress from an urban area, she said to Conrad. I don't know anything about forestry. Besides, nothing I do on the forestry subcommittee is going to help the problems of the cities. I'm going to ask for a change in assignment. Shirley went to the Speaker of the House of Representatives, John McCormack of Massachusetts, and asked for a transfer to another committee. McCormack listened kindly to her, but refused to help. Why don't you accept the assignment and be a good soldier, Mrs. Chisholm, the House Speaker said to her. McCormack was in his 80s, and he had been in Washington a long time. Shirley thought over McCormack's advice. No, she said to herself. That's what's wrong with the country. There are too many good soldiers, accepting too many bad decisions. Word! Oh my God! Oh, God, this is great. At the next full meeting of the House Democratic Caucus, Shirley asked that the caucus withdraw her name from the House Agriculture Subcommittee. Wilbur Mills was astonished. No one had ever bucked his authority before. Oh, my God. Like, how do you just not love Shirley Chisholm? Like, fuck yeah. Shirley shook her head. If Mills... Oh, wait, hold on. I missed a sentence. Will the gentlewoman from Brooklyn withdraw her request? Mills asked. Shirley shook her head. If Mills thought he was going to call her bluff, she had to prove that she wasn't bluffing. It was a tough moment for a fresh congresswoman. The caucus was silent as the black congresswoman from Brooklyn and the senior congressman from Arkansas both refused to budge. The caucus didn't vote on Shirley's request, but a few weeks later, the unheard of happened. Shirley Chisholm got a change of assignment. Mills placed Shirley on the Veterans Affairs Committee. At least, Shirley told her reporters, there are veterans in Brooklyn, and there is a Veterans Administration hospital there too. I can see where I can contribute something on the Veterans Affairs Committee. I intend to use my position on this committee to see to it that all veterans are informed of their rights and benefits under the law. One reporter wrote that Shirley Chisholm's battle over her committee assignment was the most vivid sign of life to date in the 91st Congress. Shirley's run-in with the senior members of Congress didn't lessen her outspokenness one bit. I am particularly struck by the number of aged men who represent America, she told one interviewer. It seems we are not taking into consideration what is happening in this country today. We are not giving bright young people, who are often so much in touch with the times, a sufficient chance to break into politics and be heard. Shirley argued for a change in the seniority system in her public speeches and on television, too. The rule of seniority in Congress slows down the country's progress, she said on one television program. It concentrates the power in the hands of a few elderly members who are often too slow to respond to the demands for social change. Shirley's reputation in Washington as a fearless rebel was established in record time. Rebel in Congress. The nation's first black congresswoman discovered that she and some of the other liberal members of Congress were thinking along similar lines when it came to legislation. The liberals often got together and asked each other to endorse their bills. Among the bills, to which Representative Chisholm gladly lent her name, was a bill to establish my cat is playing with me, a national holiday commemorating the birthday of the slain civil rights leader Martin Luther King. Representative Chisholm found that there was one area where she found herself in disagreement with many other black and liberal congressmen. Many Washington leaders had decided that the answer to the problem of inequality in America lay in the magic words, black capitalism. The way they embraced the new theory made Shirley suspicious. Just what is black capitalism? Shirley argued in her usual outspoken fashion. Is it a tax incentive plan for white businessmen? Just how many black capitalists or businessmen can they create? Shirley believed that the way to end poverty in America for both black and white was to concentrate on manpower training. We have to provide jobs for everybody and train people to fill those jobs, she said time and again. And it's fucking true. Not everybody can be a capitalist. People have to be fucking workers. And workers deserve dignity. We have to provide jobs for everybody. Well, we all know what I think about this stuff anyway. So, but, come on. She wove her theories on the need for a massive manpower training program into her first major speech in Congress. A huge defense spending bill related to the war in Vietnam was before the House of Representatives for a vote. Shirley got up to explain to her fellow legislators why she was going to vote no. I'm going to vote against this defense money bill and every defense money bill that comes before the House of Representatives until the time comes when our values and priorities have been turned right side up again, Shirley told the other members of Congress. As I take this stand today, I am joined by every mother, wife, and widow in this land who ever asked herself why the generals can play with billions while families crumble under the weight of sickness, hunger, and unemployment. Shirley's powerful first speech to Congress came 3 months after her inauguration. It was one more proof that the little black lady from Brooklyn was not satisfied with merely being in Congress, but that she intended to make her voice heard on all the major issues of the day. Shirley became honorary president of the National Association for the Repeal of Abortion Laws, NARAL, which seeks to have the laws making abortion a crime abolished, laws that Shirley Chisholm has called cruel, inhuman, and archaic. National and international issues were exciting, but Shirley didn't forget about the 12th Congressional District in Brooklyn that she was elected to represent. After searching for a long time for the right location, Shirley opened a congressional district office in the heart of the district on Eastern Parkway. During the week when Shirley was in Washington, the Brooklyn office was run by Wesley Holder and a staff of young people that he and Shirley had selected. Every Friday evening, Congresswoman Chisholm sat in a large black room with the congressional district office and met with her constituents, the neighborhood people from the 12th Congressional District. These Friday evenings in the Brooklyn district office were an important part of Shirley's life as a congresswoman. The people who came to see her each week had problems they hoped their representative in Congress would help them solve. Some of the people who came to see Shirley were trying to get into a public housing project. Some were trying to get into work training programs. Some were having trouble with the welfare department or with their landlords. Often a telephone call or a letter from Representative Chisholm could straighten the matter out. The Friday evenings were also important to Shirley because it was a good opportunity for her to discuss politics with the people who had helped elect her. As a sensitive congresswoman, she knew that she always needed to be in touch with what the people in her district were thinking about a variety of issues. During Shirley's first year in Congress, it was time for the New York City mayoral elections. Mayor John Lindsay, who had served the city for 4 years during a tough period of school strikes, garbage strikes, and subway, bus, and taxi strikes, was running for re-election. But he was being challenged by someone in his own Republican Party. The Democrats put up several candidates for their own Democratic Party primary. Shirley's choice in the Democratic primary didn't win. Mayor Lindsay was beaten by his fellow Republican in his own primary. The newspapers were calling the results of both primaries a victory for conservatism and a white backlash. Mayor Lindsay was on the ballot for the general election in November as an independent candidate and as a candidate of the Liberal Party. He called Representative Chisholm and asked her for her support. Shirley thought it over. She decided that Lindsay was the best candidate in the race, and that as an honest politician, she had to support him, regardless of party labels. Shirley announced her support of Mayor Lindsay at a press conference at City Hall. She was the first Democratic representative to join the mayor's campaign openly. The reaction within the Democratic Party was predictable. Shirley's fellow Democratic congressman from Brooklyn, an 81-year-old Emmanuel Seller, declared on television that he thought Representative Chisholm ought to resign her post as Democratic National Committee woman. Other Democrats joined with Seller to attack Shirley Chisholm for breaking party ranks. "This is just further indication to me," Shirley answered back, "that some party leaders are not attuned to what is happening in this country." As usual, Shirley weathered the storm. The rebel congresswoman didn't resign her seat on the Democratic National Committee. The Amsterdam News took to calling her a black Joan of Arc. Lindsay was reelected. So This is her talking over the year with Conrad. So I thought I would just kind of break in here. You're leading a fuller life than most people, black or white, male or female, Conrad said, smiling in agreement. I knew when I married you that Shirley Chisholm was going to make a name for herself. You know, Shirley said, I've been thinking lately about all the people who encouraged me to make something out of my life. Granny Seals on the farm who taught me about hard work. My mother and father who wanted me to go to college more than anything in the world. And Professor Warsoff at Brooklyn College, who was the first person to suggest that I go into politics for a career. And then there are the three heroines that I used to read about, Harriet Tubman, Susan B. Anthony, and Mary McLeod Bethune. Their life stories encouraged me too, by proving to me that it could be done. Don't you think that your life story will encourage the young people who are growing up now? Conrad asked. Shirley didn't answer. She didn't have to. Her smile said it all. She was very happy. And then it goes into her second campaign. I think we're going to skip that. I am getting tired now, and I'm going to have to wrap up. There's not many pages left. But I thought I would read through the facts that you might like to know. Some facts you might like to know. In the State Assembly, a bill is first discussed by a small committee. A new bill to do with housing would be discussed by the Housing Committee, a bill on schools by the Education Committee, and so on. Although thousands of bills are introduced each year to the State Assembly, only a small number gets past this committee stage and onto the floor of the Assembly. When a bill does get reported out, it is then voted on by all the assemblymen. If the bill is approved by the Assembly, it goes on to the State Senate. If it is approved by the Senate, it goes on to the governor of the state. If the governor doesn't like the bill, it says he can veto it, but we all know that women can be governors too. So this is from, it's interesting too because it's written by like Susan Brownmiller, who's a women's liberationist. So it's kind of interesting. Oh, was she a liberationist? I don't know. Let me think about that. Probably. I don't know. What does that mean? So that is, they can refuse to sign it so that it cannot become law. 2. Lobbyists work for all various interest groups that want certain bills passed or defeated in the legislature. Such varied groups as the Teamsters Union, the State Harness Racing Association, the American Medical Association. We know about them, don't we, folk? The Civil Liberties Union, the NAACP, to name a very few. The lobbyist job is to persuade the assemblymen and senators of their organization's point of view with statistics and arguments. They are known as lobbyists because years ago they used to do most of their work in the lobby outside the legislative chamber. 3. I don't know. We actually don't really need to know any of this. Yeah, fuck this. Let's not read that. Here's that V for victory again. Well, even though it was a little rough, I'd like to thank everyone for staying with me through this stream and everyone who's participated in the chat. Oh, interesting. Lise wrote about her experiences with watching Chisholm as a child. So let me read this. She ran for president in 1972 because my father watched the news on TV every night and followed politics and supported Nixon. I was 10 and argued with my dad that I supported Democrats, mostly because I watched All in the Family on TV, and I learned the difference between Dems and the GOP from that show. I remember watching the election returns on TV, seeing reporters talk about Chisholm's historic campaign. So, I mean, yeah, this this woman was really an important figure in American history. And I want to thank you for tuning in and, either reminiscing about her for some of you or learning about her for maybe the first time for others. It's really